Hello, welcome to the Black Girl's Guide to Bachelor Nation. This is the Black and Boozy channel. I'm here today to talk about The Bachelor, Season 25, starring Matt James as the first Black Bachelor. I was so excited to talk about this episode that I couldn't be bothered to put on a stitch of makeup or comb my hair. I just wanted to come on here and talk about it, which is exactly the opposite of the end of Claire and Tayshia's season. I didn't want to talk about that at all. I think that this was a stellar first episode, and it is quite possibly my favorite episode to date. So let's get started. The episode starts with a cold open. It is literally a girl getting out of the limo in a strappy, sparkly ball gown. She's got her hand behind her back as she introduces herself to Matt James, the first Black Bachelor, and makes some reference to not leaving something at home. And she reveals that she is carrying a vibrator. Yes, that kind of vibrator. Our jaws drop, Matt's jaw drops, and then he proceeds to laugh. And then we are welcomed to this episode of The Bachelor. We meet Matt James, we learn about his background, the fact that even though he looks like Beaker in the face, he looks like body yaddy yaddy through the abs. I understand why everybody goes crazy for him. Matt James walks out of the limo, sees Chris Harrison, and before the first limo gets to pull up, he pulls Chris Harrison aside for a man chat. Chris Harrison says, "You seem nervous." He says, "I am." And Matt James goes on to explain the pressure that he has placed upon himself being the first Black Bachelor. He explains that his mom is white and his dad is Black, so that makes him both white and Black. He says that people will want him to end up with a certain type of person. Chris Harrison says, "What does that mean?" At this point, I'm already starting to get annoyed because what does that mean? Come on, Chris Harrison. Okay, or maybe you are just that basic white man and you don't actually know what that means. That just says to me like the franchise has already let us down. If the only person that can have this chat on camera with Matt James is Chris Harrison, I mean, come on. Where are all these other people that we've seen on Zoom, that we've seen in La Quinta? Like, where are they? Why are we doing this with Chris Harrison? He goes on to say that it's tough because people have certain views. He doesn't want to make Black people mad. He doesn't want to make anybody mad. And all that Chris Harrison has to offer to all of that bearing of soul and vulnerability, that it's a lot. Really? I mean, that's going to get a whole entire side eye. Actually, the whole entire conversation is going to get a side eye for me. Is it too early for a Black lady rant? Because I have a Black lady rant about this. Listen, I am sure that it is a lot of pressure to be the first Black Bachelor. I am sure that it's a lot of pressure to be the first Black Bachelor who has a white parent, who has spent a lot of time. I mean, he played football for Wake Forest, for heaven's sake. Like, maybe there weren't a lot of Black women in his dating pool. There's probably, I mean, he's a Trump voter. Even if there were a lot of Black women in his dating pool, they probably wouldn't want anything to do with him. But I have questions. I am suspicious. I am jaded. I am offended that the only person that could have this chat is Chris Harrison. That's number one. Number two, I also am convinced that this is producer driven, right? Like, we've seen people lose their minds at points in time and pull Chris Harrison to the side. He didn't get pulled to the side. He got pulled to a room that is already set up with two single chairs. Not, let's sit down on these couches or on this bench or on these steps and talk about this really quickly. He went into a room that had an entire setup. Leather chairs, candles, ambiance, lighting, the whole thing. So that lets me know that this is completely producer driven. Okay, and then if this is producer driven, and these aren't about Matt James's fears, right? Matt James, the pressure that he placed upon himself and what it means to be the first Black Bachelor and what it probably means to be the first Black Bachelor who doesn't have a lot of Black women in his life to know what that even looks like. I mean, and of course that is an assumption. I understand that he has dated a Black woman in the past. I mean, okay. All of these questions would come up for a person before They are moments away from the first person getting out of the limo. The fact that this is producer driven means that this is something that the producers want to control the narrative of. We want to let you know that he doesn't want black people to be mad at him before the first person gets out of the limo. They're trying to control the narrative, and they're not diverse enough. There aren't enough people who actually understand what the pressures are and what the pressures are about. The producers wanted to present it like, oh, his mom is white, but like what happens if he chooses a white person, and all those people are going to be bad, and his dad is black, and black people want to see him pick a black person. Those two things aren't the same. One of them is steeped in the racism of other people. The idea that he's going to corrupt some white woman with his blackness, and the idea that black people maybe want to see a representation of black love. The blackest bachelorette did not choose a black man, and I am certainly okay with that. The fact that black America is collectively holding their breath to know that they're probably going to be humiliated before we have met a single one of the lady contestants. Come on. Okay, now that we've gotten all the racial angst out of the way, let's get to the limo exits. I'm not going to go through all of the ladies who get out of the limo. I'll just touch on the ones that you may have heard about or will read about this week and the weeks to come. We have Katie. We've already spoken about Katie. She is the one with the vibrator. Abigail, who is hard of hearing. We have Chelsea, who is model, stunning, statuesque, walks out of the limo, looks Matt James right in the eye. She's out in her bone structure, high cheekbones, chocolate skin, barely their dress, and to see somebody just show up in their natural black beauty and be stunning too. It was just everything to me. Bree in her green dress. I think we will see a lot of Bree. We have Mari, who is a Puerto Rican beauty pageant queen. There are very few people that I saw Matt James just seem very excited about, but Mari is one of those people. And last but not least, we have Kaylee, who walks up with her short satin robe open to reveal just her bra and panties as she pulls two dresses on a rack up to Matt James and proceeds to walk into the resort where the women literally are like, what? Because she has no clothes on. I would like to say though, that she didn't walk into the room and say, yes, bitches, I didn't even put on a dress. I 100% think that she showed up with her robe closed and a producer said, where they do that at? This is television. Open that up. You've got the body to do it. Let's make good television. So after all the ladies are inside, this is typically when the lead walks into the room and does a toast. But Matt James is not the typical lead. He hasn't been on the show before. What does Matt James do? Leads everyone in a prayer. Now, wait. The internet is very divided about this prayer, and I'm on the side of I didn't like that prayer. I thought it was inappropriate. If you want to pray, fine by me. If you want to take some people aside and you guys want to hold hands and be in a circle and lift up a prayer on the first night, the first time that you are addressing the rest of the contestants at one time, you're in a position of power, you don't know anything about the people in the room, and you're going to lead them in a Christian prayer. I thought it was presumptuous, and I also know that I'm probably the only black person who watches The Bachelor who didn't like it. I mean, black people are fanning themselves. They loved it. I will say this about it. I thought it was one of the blackest things we've ever seen a person do as a lead. And I understand he's from the South. I understand that people in the South just assume that everybody wants to bow their head in prayer in school, at baseball games, doesn't even matter. And I get it. And I know for a lot of people, it was everything. Coming down off the soapbox, I just think that when we talk about diversity, I'm going to rant about diversity later. I'm just going to take a sip now. Let's cover the first rose ceremony of the season. I'm not even going to go into who stayed and who went. There's so many people who actually cares. This, by far, is my favorite rose ceremony that I've ever seen The rose ceremony, we literally just got to the distribution of the rose. I thought the comic timing was perfect. I thought the pacing was perfect. I thought the background music was perfect. I would say the villain of this episode was definitely Queen Victoria, with Kit coming in at very close second place. Kit also happens to be the daughter of famous designer Cynthia Rowley. Cynthia Rowley is also somebody I do not enjoy on reality TV, so I'm guessing that I am not going to be enjoying Kit on reality TV. My overall impression was that I thoroughly enjoyed this episode. I felt like I went on the highs and the lows. I see the producers' work, which you don't necessarily always want to see. I do wonder about some of the things that have really upset me this episode, including the Chris Harrison chat. Really, was the point of the chat to warn Black women that Matt James wasn't going to pick a Black person? Possibly. Was the point of it to stir up conversation? Probably more likely. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, everybody, TikTok, everybody talking about this conversation. So from a producing standpoint, that's what you want. You want people to continue the conversation into the next day. The other thing, Prayergate, hashtag Prayergate, right? I'm also up in arms about that thing and people love it. And it makes me think that maybe this is their way to compensate for a bachelor who is not white, a bachelor who doesn't know how it works, a bachelor who we don't know, right? How else are we going to be invested in the drama if this is somebody we don't know already? They've been taking a shortcut ever since Jason Mesnick's season. My final Black Lady rant of the day is that The Bachelor seems to be seeking diversity. They want a pat on the back for their first Black Bachelor. They chose somebody who was a conservative, someone who was a Christian. And so for all of the push for diversity, they essentially found somebody who, in every other way except for the fact that he has one Black parent, is just like every other lead we've ever seen. I mean, maybe disappointing isn't the word, it's a television show, but it is certainly a little bit frustrating. It's frustrating to know that all these people are tuning in to see this, to know that this is just simply more of the same. And I mentioned Black women just collectively holding their breath. And I think that people misunderstand what the breath holding is about. Certainly on national television, we don't want to see a Black man be humiliated. And he is phenotypically Black, and we just want the best for him. So that's one reason. The second is that I am under no illusion that he would necessarily pick a Black person, a Black woman. I don't actually even need him to. But what I would hope from the first Black Bachelor is that he comes to the show open-minded to the possibility of finding love with other people. We asked the white people to be open-minded. Over almost 40 seasons of television, only a handful of people have actually cracked the top 4. I mean, that says something about the preferences of the people they cast on the show and of the audience. It can be that he hasn't had a serious relationship with a Black woman. It can be that he's never had a serious relationship with anyone. But what I would hope is that he gives everyone who's shown up there, the people who are enthusiastic and excited to see someone who looks like their uncle, brother, father, cousin, I hope that he has the ability to give them time to reveal themselves to him and to America. When people are talking about the sensitivity of Black women, instead of like really examining that, they just decide to write it off as sour grapes. Even if you're not selected as the final, you want to be considered and you want to be seen. We have been told that what we value, what Bachelor Nation values, what the men value are white women. Even if that's not Matt James's love match, and I really have my doubts about whether the person who he's selected as his final one is actually going to be his wife, as he's never been in love before. Not that that means anything, but it probably means that you're not finding your forever love in 10 weeks on national television. My hope is that he actually gives them time to do the activities, to go on dates, to tell their stories, to give himself a chance to know people he might not otherwise speak to or meet in person, and for America to have an opportunity to meet women who look a particular way, who we would have never met in this setting, to be able to have the trappings of what a bachelor appearance entails. The chance to actually maybe be bachelorette, the chance for the sponsorships, for the Instagram money, for all the reasons outside of being selected as the final one. The Black contestants, both men and women, do not have the same access, and that's because they have been dismissed. Okay, I guess maybe I've had too much wine. Thank you for listening to my impromptu chat. Next week, I don't know what we'll talk about next week.